Mike Meisels here at the Australian Crypto Con, the global enterprise account executive from Chainalysis. Now, you guys see what's going on the chains. What are you sort of seeing right now in the market in terms of movement of coins? What are you seeing?
Yeah, look, the first thing I want to say is we're not the police. So what we do is we turn anonymous transactions into insights. So we get to understand what's happening on chain, who's doing what, where money is moving to, and we help crypto exchanges, banks, DeFi organizations stay compliant, stay trusted in what they're trying to do. And at the end of the day, that's where, mainstream adoption comes from, because it needs that level of trust when it comes into it. But what we're seeing is a huge amount of money being moved into stable coins, institutions moving into that. You can see what's going on in the US. Stable coins is now becoming the hot topic of interest, especially from an institutional point of view.
Interesting. And any particular chains you're seeing having a lot of growth right now that you're surprised about with stablecoins?
We see the standard chains. There's definitely a huge movement on Tron. We see that for multiple purposes. When we look at it from an illicit point of view, we do see a lot of activity moving on to Tron quite quickly because of the cheaper fees. We're dealing with entrepreneurs who, they want to maintain the money that they've taken. So they move it onto the cheaper chains to move along with. But, we see huge adoption with tokenization. There's a lot of new chains coming on. Most of the exchanges are bringing out new chains. You heard of Coinbase is one. There's definitely some exciting games to be moving into. But, stable coins is where they move the monetary and liquidity value so that you can actually start to build in these new world assets, new tokenized assets.
Mark, on terms of chains and stable coins right now, any sort of interesting fake volume or weird things you're seeing on certain chains and more activity?
Not really in terms of fake volume. We're definitely seeing a lot more movement. We're seeing a lot more movement from centralized exchanges into the DeFi world and into wallets, but not really in terms of fake volume. We're seeing, if you look at volume when you're outside of, what we call as, dollar value of fake volume, we're seeing a huge amount of interactions that are happening in scams and illicit activity that ways. And that's causing, volume on chains to grow massively. We're seeing a lot of organizations like the scams, etc., are moving into these fake tokens, fake trends in order to, acquire tokens from other people.
What are sort of the top two biggest, scams or things that are happening right now that people should be aware of?
I think the two biggest ones we have at the moment that I would want everyone to be aware of is romance scams or pig butchering scams. These organizations, if you think about the scam industry itself is a $70 billion industry. It's not just the money they're taking, it's the infrastructure that's setting out for the next wave of scams to come. And this all comes from the profit that these scammers are getting out of their victims. So the first one is the romance scams. People weighing into egos, they're working out who their victims are, they're working out how they can twist the ego to get the money out, whether it's love scams, whether it's investment scams. I think people just need to be so mindful about who they're talking to nowadays online with the world of AI, deep fakes, the changes we're seeing in bots, for example. These are just growing and growing much quicker than we've ever seen before. They always start off with being your next best friend. They're trying to get your confidence, build up the trust, and then bang, comes the part where they're trying to get some money out of you. And it's amazing how many times we see that. You remember how con artists worked. To be a con, and the old-fashioned con is, you have to give a convincer to someone in order for them to gain your trust. So if you feel like you're getting something back, then you're willing to do more next time. So if you think about how a farmer works, a farmer fattens a pig up until he's ready enough to slaughter them. So the idea of pig butchering is you're fattening up the victim until the point where you've got as much out of them as you can by give and take back. So if you're trying to convince them, how do you convince a human being? Well, you make them feel warm and fuzzy inside. You give them gifts, or you make them feel that they're getting something out of it that they're really not, until the point where they're giving stuff back to you, and then that's the end of it. They're getting to the point where you've got all you want from that person, and it's down to the kill. And that's what these scammers are trained into. That's what these businesses are. They're the best entrepreneurs in the market in focusing in on that side of ego.
That's fascinating. Very, very smart. When it comes to, a lot of like regulation right now, there's a lot of, I guess, there's an AML side, which is really, that sort of came out quite early, AML KYC to some extent. And I guess wallet, would you say vetting to some extent and checking where tokens are coming from? That kind of like was the beginning. And now we're seeing a whole lot of other changes in terms of where do these tokens sit. But let's just go back to that beginning. What have been some of the changes, or what are some of the new things in this AML KYC space that is coming or changing?
Yeah, look, I think as an industry, we've always had regulations at mind. We've always had anti-money laundering laws. We've always had counterterrorism laws. Those have been there for a long, long time. And the idea is you need to know who you're doing business with. You need to know where the funds are coming from. You need to prevent money laundering, terrorist financing, all of those standard rules that traditional finance have put in from day dot to prevent those types of rules. But where we're really seeing that next part of regulation, and I feel this is where the industry has to build some, muscle around it, is around the scams. I feel that's the next level of, organizations having to repay their victims for things that they haven't put in place. We're seeing it in the UK. We're seeing that these, the loss of funds is becoming an issue. Now that we're moving all of our value on chain, it's not just money anymore, it's value. The idea that we're moving value around this chain very, very quickly, very easily, means that this is now, could even be a national security challenge, that we're now at the point where Western money is now moving different sides and going off to west to east, as it were. So we now have to put in controls around not just the AML and the CTF controls that we normally put in, but we have to put in controls around who is this person sending money to? Are they being scammed? Are they doing something where they feel that they're not, they feel that they're being led on, or as you said, being, conned into doing something they shouldn't be conned into, or even lying to their families around it. So and I think that's the next level.
When someone does get scammed, like, you feel pretty bad, you feel shame, and you don't feel good about it. Do you have any tips for like people dealing with post-scam feelings and emotions?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Look, at the end of the day, I think all of us in an industry has been phished or scammed once. It's not about being ashamed about it, but it's about being comfortable enough to open up quickly around that so you can seek help. The first thing to do is to stop talking to those scammers, stop engaging exactly what you're doing. If your wallet has been compromised, move it back onto a centralized exchange where they can give you control and security. But also reach out to law enforcement, regulators, and they'll tell you what the next action is to do. But don't stay silent. There's people out there to help you. There's people out there to give you advice. And remember, these things are always, it's only what you've lost today. You can always make back that money tomorrow. And so, the most important thing is your mental health when it comes to it. There's people out there that will help you.
Yeah, I've had my fair share as well of scams. It just didn't work out. Projects didn't work out. This person wasn't what they said they were. They didn't do what they were going to say. You're definitely part of the industry. And I think it's really good you call that out. And as I said, I just don't go quiet. In fact, get loud and start telling people, because it helps. It helps. And not only helps yourself and to heal, but I think it helps other people as well.
Oh, exactly. If you tell someone about what's happened, then the industry becomes more aware of these things. 2023 was address poisoning. I don't know if you remember address poisoning. So people used to come up with wallet addresses that would look like yours and send you an airdrop or send you dust to it so that you would copy and paste it back in, thinking it was yours. These scams are being innovative and changing all the time. And until someone says, I went through the scam and we understand what the scam was, we can't help everyone else. We can't make it addressable. We can't tell the rest of the people and keep everyone else safe. So yes, get loud. Tell people about what's happened. Don't be ashamed about it. At the end of the day, this is all part of, human life. At the end of the day, we all have to learn and move on.
I appreciate you sharing that. So I think it's really important for everyone listening as well. And lastly, anything coming up exciting about, at Chainalysis you want to talk about?
Look, we have our conference coming up in March, Link's conference in New York. You're welcome to come if you would like to. But in terms of where we're going, you know, we're doubling down on our efforts to keep everyone safe. We've done a big investment in scam investment technologies to help organizations as well as security. But, you know, we're here for the long term. You know, you're not going to get mainstream adoption without this level of trust and security in the market. And that's what we're here to provide.
Wonderful. Mark, thank you so much for joining us to find out. Appreciate it.